Let's talk about it. 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 On the field.
Hello, hello, hello. I am so excited to be here today, and I'm especially excited about our topic and my guests. And I'm going to pull her up and share with you her bio. And this is Miss Fouchina Kirkendoll. How are you doing today?
Oh, great. How are you?
I am magnificent. I'm just so glad you're here. So
Well,
let's share
nice
with
to
the
meet you
audience
too.
a little bit about Fouchina Kirkendoll. She is the CEO of Chronicles of a Favored Woman and a resident of Duluth, Georgia. She holds a BA in Managerial Arts from Charleston Southern University, as well as master credits in public administration from Strayer University. Along with her education, she has over 24 years of experience in the nonprofit sector advocating for those in need. Once a victim, now a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, she recalls the feelings of loneliness and confusion. And after decades of suffering and silence, she made the decision to face it and to help others do the same. And at that point, she started using the power of her voice to speak up, to speak out, and to encourage others to do the same. So I am so glad you are here today. And you say, once touched, now redeemed. Out of this experience is where Chronicles of a Favored Woman was birthed. So that is just so awesome that you have been able to overcome and to now help others overcome as well. And
Thank you.
you know, I want to start because today we're talking about parents and the attitudes and behaviors that they bring into parenting that can in fact impact on themselves as well as their children. And given that, I want to just start this session with, I'm saying session because I'm feeling like we're getting ready to work.
I think we're gonna be going to work.
Yes, yes, we're getting ready to work. So let me ask our audience, why is it our kids, they know right, yet they do wrong? They are loved, yet they feel they don't belong. Have what we did not, yet our beliefs and values they seem to have forgot. Our kids, third, fourth, fifth generation kids, leaping like frogs in jars with no lids. Our kids, some people say, would rather be cool, even if they don't want to go to school. Our kids, other people say, would rather be ghetto, move backwards, move slow. Our kids, second, third, fourth generation kids, living within the walls of our change, and we say, strange. Our kids become who we show them we are. Perhaps they're living in the midst of our scars. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. The scars that so oftentimes we as parents bring into parenting. Now, before we start this, Fouchina, I'm going to give you an opportunity to just kind of share some things with our audience, a little bit about you and why this topic is so important to you today. So I'm going to give you the floor and let you share with our audience.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me again. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I'm trying to mess with this camera here. I really appreciate it. And as she mentioned before, my name is Fouchina Kirkendoll. I'm actually no stranger. I've been here before, so I thank you for having the opportunity to come again. Um, I am the CEO, and I'm a CEO of Chronicles of a Favorite Woman. It has been a tremendous experience. Coming from the background of molestation and from abuse, verbal, emotional, mental, all types of things, having to deal with addiction, having to deal with whether it's pain, whether it's sex, whatever the case may be. All of these things permeates in us for a certain amount of time until we start getting a hold of it. For me, it was getting the power of my voice. And once I got the power of my voice, I was able to live better. I was able to learn better. I was able to receive better from that. And I say that because as a younger female, especially a young mother, having a child who run, I really didn't know, you know, the fundamental. I didn't know how to raise a child. I wasn't the, that ideal parent that people see. I'm not the Mark Cleaver or the Brady Bunch lady. I wasn't that person. I suffered a lot, and as a result of going through what I was going through, and then on top of that, a bad marriage on top of it just took a toll. It was a spiral, and you tend to miss signs. You tend to miss signs from your own children. I say that because I was dealing with my own insecurities. I was dealing with my own scars. I was dealing with a whole bunch of my own things that I just didn't take the time to get the red flags that was being said to me on behalf of my children. Now, the last time I came to you, it's interesting that I'm saying that because I remember the last time I spoke to you and I told you, as parents, we have to pay attention to our children. We have to pay attention to know what's norm, what's not norm, and if something's going on with them, because children they will always give you sign of what's going on in their lives. And I missed the mark in some of that. I truly missed the mark in some of that. Now, the interesting thing is some things I knew, and I just couldn't put my finger on it. And I had to decipher whether I was being over analytical or what I'm seeing is actually what I'm seeing. So having to deal with that, and then dealing with the insecurities and stuff that I had of my own, and dealing with a marriage that was on the rocks, I just missed the mark. And I didn't create the environment for my son. I came from that strict children should be seen and not heard. And I brought it over to me because that's all I knew. Children be seen and heard. And I didn't have a voice. I didn't have an opinion. So my opinion was not valued. I would say that. Now, no pun against my family, no pun against anyone. That's just people raise their children based on what they know. And that's just all to it. And as a result of it, I found out later, my son came to me and told me he was a victim like myself of molestation. And that just blew me away because a part of me said, you know what? I had a feeling. I had a feeling that was what's going on. And instead of diving into doing that, I was more so trying to deal with mine. But what I've learned out of it, because now he's 27, and now we're learning all the attitudes, all the personality, the clashes between us, it all stemmed from him being molested himself. And as a mother, you feel like a failure. And then I had to get to a point where I had to forgive myself because he actually forgave me, because now I started looking at myself as in I have a 10-year-old as well. And what I'm learning is how to pay attention. But I had to take care of China first. What do I mean? Is I had to deal with my insecurities and I had to deal with my demons first.
Yes. And those are we want to talk about the behaviors and the attitudes that parents bring into being parents. Like you were saying, you had to heal yourself before you could really address the issues of your children. And see, awareness precedes change. And oftentimes we don't realize the impact of some of these behaviors as they impact on us as individuals, but also as they impact on our children. And so we're going to go through the litany of lists. Now, I developed this little activity, and I find it to be very powerful in allowing people to really look at themselves and look at, do I really do this? And if I do, what impact does it have on me? What impact does it have on my child? And the first one is avoiding conflict altogether. Now, when you were talking about your son and you knew something was wrong, but you couldn't put your finger on it, and you nor did you really address it at that time. And it might have been because you were possibly trying to avoid any uncomfortable experience with knowing that he had been molested.
Well, that's part of it, but a part of it was how I went about doing it. Because if you coming at them charging, like, but
Right.
this happened, did this happen, did this happen, this happened, they back up, because I'm not creating that comfortable environment for you to freely express yourself, to freely know that I'm here for you. So that's part of it too.
Yes. And we have a guest that's here. Let's go to our comments. And Lenora Barnes, she's here now. How are you doing? Happy New Year. Happy New Year
Happy
to
New
you.
Year.
And we're so glad that you have chimed in here with us. We're talking about behaviors and attitudes that parents often bring into relationships and into parenting that can impact upon their children. And the first one that we mentioned was avoiding conflict altogether. And to just kind of give an overview, rather than discussing, building frustration, and rather than discussing something, you start building frustration, and you remain what appears to be calm, respectful manner instead of, well, let me back up. Let me read this over again. Rather than discussing building frustrations in a calm, respectful manner, sometimes we may just don't say anything to our children or spouse or even our friends or others until we're ready to explode. And then blurt it out in anger and in hurtful ways. Now, if you experience that, and that also can be much like a passive aggressive personality type, because I know I experienced this kind of behavior in my marriage where my husband would be calm and not say anything, and me not even be aware that there were some things bothering him until it got to a point where he would explode and just get all out the pocket. When in actuality, had we been able to have a calm, peaceful conversation, then we could have eliminated the anger and the hurtful ways that were going on. So if anyone in our audience finds themselves holding on to things and then exploding, one of the things I want to encourage you to do is start talking out your feelings. And even if it's uncomfortable, you might say something like, this is really uncomfortable for me, but I need to get it out. And that way you're not putting yourself in a situation where you're holding stuff in. And also in holding things in, it can affect us physically. We could have stomach aches, backaches, headaches, all those kinds of things because we're keeping stuff inside. You want to comment on that as well?
Actually, I do. You said a very good thing about avoiding. I know that sometimes people avoid because I know for me, I had to avoid because my tongue was very sharp. And I knew that I can cut you like a two-edged sword with my tongue. So it was better for me to avoid. But what I had to learn to do is don't hold it in. Yes, you do need to get it out. And I tell people, write it down. Sometimes before you even go to that person, you just need to write it down, and why are you writing it down? Whether it's just, at my desk, I used to have slips of paper. And when somebody would tick me off or whatever the case may be, I'll just write on a slip of paper, I'll tear it up and throw it away. Or you could write a letter to that person. But the goal is to get it out because it's toxic when you keep it in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you are so right. Being able to express it either verbally or by getting it out. And there's a scripture that says a sharp tongue turns away wrath.
Yes.
You
You will get
know,
more with honey than you get with vinegar.
yeah. So being able to be calm when speaking. And we can tell when we're getting riled up. We can tell when we're getting ready to lash out. And so being able to calm ourselves in the midst of whatever we're holding on to. And then the other one is
And
being deep. Oh, go ahead.
before you do that, also remember you want to be in a calm state when you approach someone. So even if something triggers you, you need to have control over your emotions because you have now defeated the purpose of going there. Okay. I'm done.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You are right. Absolutely. You don't want to come if you're angry and frustrated, put it on hold for a minute. Put it on hold.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
find that calm space to have those conversations. Now,
Mhm.
being defensive. Now that's rather than addressing a complaint with an objective eye or willingness to understand the other person's point of view, we may deny any wrongdoing and work hard to avoid looking at the possibilities that one could be contributing to a problem. Denying responsibility may seem to alleviate stress in the short run, but it creates long-term problems when this is a constant and your children or your spouse, they don't feel listened to. And the unresolved conflict continues to grow because of the defensive mechanism that has been in place.
Mhm. That goes back to, as what I hear out of that is you need to be approachable.
Yes,
Whether they can come to you or you going to them. And we have a tendency, we can tell you everything about what everybody else is doing, but we quick to do that, but we're slow to check ourselves first. So for me, I have
absolutely.
to learn to check myself first and ask myself, what role did I play in this?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, awareness precedes change.
Hmm.
Instead of becoming defensive, and trying to make excuses or
Hmm.
to defend your actions and behaviors, listen to what the other person is saying and
And
check yourself. Check
yes,
yourself because that
exactly.
also, if as a parent, I am always in defense mode, what am I teaching my children?
Exactly. And then when you hear it back, then you take it as disrespect. But no, it's not, even though it may. However, where did they get it from? They had to learn it from somewhere. And that's what I had to learn with my 27-year-old, but especially my 10-year-old. I'm learning that even more. And one of the things he's mentioned to me is, Mom, when you yell at me, it makes me feel a certain way. And that was powerful for me to hear have
Yes.
him say that. And that was done through therapy, when you yell. And then I saw something, I was taking a class with a gentleman by the name of Damien, and he said it showed a picture of when we're yelling at children, how it makes it and minimizes them every time. And then
Absolutely.
we wonder why they can't speak up for themselves, why they can't do this for themselves.
Absolutely.
It's because we are stripping their power away. So when I
Absolutely.
learned that and started saying, hey, let's have this conversation. First, I'd be like, Mom need her mommy time. I go into my prayer closet. I have my mommy time. Okay. And when I come back out, then let's address the situation.
Absolutely. And yelling, studies have also shown that the brain waves in children that are constantly yelled at are different from children that are not yelled at so much. And
That's very
also,
true.
I had a teacher even tell me that she can tell right off the bat a child that has come from a home that's where there's constant yelling and a child where not so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yelling, and as parents, that yelling, we can tell when we're getting ready to get riled up. So,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, and like you do, recognize that and calm yourself. Go
Mm-hmm.
into your closet, be it your prayer closet or your calming closet.
That's
Just go
right.
into that closet and calm yourself. Have your son or your child go into their room and think about what it was that they did, and
Mm-hmm.
then come back and let's talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
one of the
Mm-hmm.
so yelling is definitely can cause lack of confidence and lack of self-esteem. Now,
Mm-hmm.
overgeneralizing. Now, when something happens that we may not like, we may blow it out of proportion by making sweeping generalizations. You always do this. You always or you never do this. Instead of stopping and thinking, is that really true? Is that really true? Do they always do this? Do they all never do this? No. Stop and think about whether or not this is really true. And then, sometimes people bring up the past conflicts, which can throw the discussion totally off topic and stir up even more negativity. So, this stands in the way of true communications and true conflict resolution, and it also increases the level of conflict. So, it's very important that we understand that it's not black and white, like you always do this or you never do that. And so being able to stop and really think about it and think about not talking about what happened yesterday, what happened a year ago, what happened 10 years ago, because we tend to do that. And guess what we're teaching our kids? Guess what we're teaching our kids by doing that? And so we don't want them to learn or think that this is the way that things are supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I agree with you. That overgeneralizing, and it's funny because I have a 27-year-old, and when I hear him talking, we're having discussions. Sometimes they get heated, and I'm like, "Son, you're going to a whole new different topic based on one thing, and then you're taking it to a whole. But we need to go back to the original conversation. Now we're way over here. No, we need to come back here." And then I found like, okay, at this moment, I'm going to disconnect the call. And when you're ready, we can have a discussion when you're ready. So that overgeneralizing I get is, but he get it from me. So
See, this is what
he
we're
get it from he
talking
get it from me. He get it from me. When your kids are a reflection of you, and you start seeing like, oh my gosh, did I really sound like that when I was growing up? And I did. I did.
See, and awareness precedes change. That's
Hmm.
why I feel it's important what we're doing today is to help
Yes.
people look at, do I do that? Do I really do that? And if
Hmm.
you do, then think of the impact that it's not only having on your children, but also your relationships and also
Yes.
on yourself. Think about
Yes.
that. And then the other
Hmm.
one is always being right.
Oh yeah.
It's damaging to decide that there's a right way to look
It's
at
my
things
way
and
or
a
the
wrong
highway.
way to look.
Hmm.
And yes, my way or the highway.
That's
And
right.
that, and when you see that my way of seeing things is always right, and one may take it as a personal attack if others have a different opinion, it is hard to look for a compromise or agreeing to disagree. That's
Hmm.
not always right, and there is not an always wrong. That the two points of view can both be valid. So sometimes we may be right, and sometimes we may not be correct. And we need to come that way, and we need to accept when other people say, "Hey, that's not correct. That's not." Now, you don't ever want to tell a person you're wrong, but you do want to address through evidence and fact.
And don't be afraid to admit when you're wrong.
Exactly. Exactly. And ask for forgiveness
Yes.
when you are.
Listen.
Forgiveness is so important. So
And I
important.
want to pause right there because I want to, in reference to the children, our kids see all of our emotions. They experience the same thing that we experience. Okay. If you get in an argument with your significant other in front of a child, they need to see
Yes.
you make up in front of that child so you could do that. There's been plenty times when I tell my children, I am never too big where I cannot humble myself. If I am wrong on something, I will come to you and have that conversation with you, because we get so caught up in this authoritative figure that
Hmm.
we tend to give out the wrong signals. And the goal is create a relationship. Create a
Absolutely.
relationship so our children can come to us about anything.
Absolutely, absolutely. We need to make sure that we're open and we're displaying an openness to them. Now, one thing I want to encourage: don't argue in front of your kids. Don't let your children see
Yes.
you fighting and
Yes.
arguing with each other, because they will then realize or think that's how you handle conflict.
And not,
Don't do this in front of them.
yes.
If
And
you've
not
got to
only that,
argue, if you've got to debate, if you've got to, the belittling and name calling should not even exist, period. It shouldn't
exactly.
exist. If you love each other, then why are you belittling each other? Why are you name calling? Why are you doing that? And you don't want your kids to see you doing that, because also what it often does is cause that child to disrespect you or the person that you're doing that with. So you don't want to have your children see that. Okay, we've got some other comments here. Felicia, hi. Good evening, beautiful people, she says. And
Good
Happy New Year
evening.
to everyone. And Happy New Year's to you too. Thank you for
Yes.
being here. We appreciate and we will appreciate all your feedback. We're talking about attitudes and behaviors that impact on our families and our children and our relationships. And we
Mm-hmm.
just started, the last one that we talked about was always being right. No one's always right 100% of the time. And so if you're one of those persons that feels like you're always right, take some time to listen. Take some time to reflect. Take some time to see things from an objective perspective.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. A person who doesn't want to listen doesn't want to learn.
That's true. And when you consider, oh, and hello, Veronica. And Veronica said it also causes anxiety. Yes, it
Yes,
does.
and it does.
All of these different behaviors can cause all kinds of anxiety. And
Mm-hmm.
when children see you fussing and arguing, it causes them to be anxious, and it can cause anxiety. Absolutely. Now the other
Mm-hmm.
is psychoanalyzing or mind reading. I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to do that. Sometimes think I already know what others are thinking or what they are going to do. You
Mm-hmm.
know, and that's being rather assumptuous, or
Mm-hmm.
presumptuous. And Felicia says arguing in front of the kids is definitely a no-no. It has a negative effect on the kids, and it shows them the wrong way to teach each other. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And that's even
Absolutely.
with family members as well. When you all have a conversation like, something that, if one of my family members say that I don't agree with it, as in front of people, in front of my children, we're a united front. But when I get you in private, we're going to have a conversation.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And that's a form of bullying also, when
Mm-hmm.
you overtalk or
Mm-hmm.
um want to front people and do that in front of other people.
Mm-hmm. It's an
That's
insecurity.
right. And it's a bullying tactic. It
Mm-hmm.
really is. So the mind reading, so I just want you to think about, instead of jumping to conclusions right off the bat. And I've been guilty of that. I have, because we're looking at this from a total perspective. None of us are perfect. And there have been times when I have thought in advance something was a certain way,
Assume.
and assumed. And you know what happens when we assume,
Exactly.
and so I did that. And so I've learned, though, Vera, sit back, think about this, wait and see what actually is the case before you
Yes.
jump to conclusions. We,
Yes.
that, and just think, when we do that, our kids see that too.
Mm-hmm.
They see that too, and could
Mm-hmm.
actually begin to do the same.
Mm-hmm. I want to give an example. I remember my son and I was going somewhere, and someone had their car parked in front of my car. And I was like, who in the world got their car parked in front of my car, not realizing the person was behind me? He said, I do. And I, so my son said, now, Mom, you know, he really didn't mean that. You know, it was an accident. He really didn't mean it. He didn't know. And I actually stopped and I was like, you know what, you're right. Because I wasn't very nice about it. And I said, you know what, young man, I had to flag him down. I flagged him down. And I said, I apologize for coming off rudely to you. I said that wasn't right. He said, ma'am, I understand. No, you know, whether you are not or you understand, I teach my son proper ways of handling conflict and stuff. And if I can't show it myself, then you know, I have to lead by example. And when he mentioned it to my attention, I knew that I had to make it right. So thank you for being gracious about it, but it still doesn't make it right. So I ask for forgiveness and keep it moving, because I let him know, even if you fly off the handle, even if you did whatever the case may be, one thing, you're not always right. Okay. So I, like you, I kind of hold back, but I listened to what he had to say. I absorbed it. And then I took action, because he needed to know I need to make this right.
Yes. Now, Veronica, she says she had to learn how not to emotionalism everything,
Yes.
but instead listen for understanding.
Veronica, emotion
as it
shows on her
to
face.
Always, beg your pardon?
Veronica's emotion shows on her face, like myself. Sometimes I have to shut my face.
Yes. And sometimes we need to listen for understanding as it relates to always being right. Absolutely.
Mhm.
We need to listen,
Exactly.
which is actually the next one that we're going to talk about, is forgetting to listen. You know, and like we often hear, God in his infinite wisdom, he gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we could listen more and maybe
And talk
talk
less.
less. And so sometimes, do we sometimes interrupt when others are talking? Um, have you been known to roll your eyes or show other negative expressions when others are talking? That is so disrespectful. And it does happen. You know, it does happen. Instead of listening, because when you're doing those physical things like rolling your eyes or showing other negative expressions, you're not listening. You're not listening, or interrupting when someone is trying to say something. That shows you have no regard for that individual. And it may be our children, you know, it could be our children, our family, our friends, you know. And so understanding that and being able to understand, I should not interrupt you when you're trying to talk, and have the same courtesy when I'm talking as well. So, and a lot of times in families, we find the over talking and all of that, and not being able to get a message across.
Well, sometimes people are not listening. They're just waiting for the opportunity to make their point.
Yes.
So they haven't heard anything you said, because they still stuck on what it is that they have to say from that former thing. But one of the things that we've learned to do as a family, especially my brother and I, is we knew that we're both alphas. So we've learned to get a sheet of paper, and when we're having a conversation, we'll write stuff down. So we'll do as a reference point, and then we'll come back and address it.
That's awesome. And actually, I think if families took the time to really listen to each other without interruption, and then have that dialogue and that feedback in those conversations, so important. Now, Felicia says, absolutely agree. We should always have a united front in front of the kids.
Oh, yes.
So that they don't try and pit us against each other to get their way. Absolutely.
Very true.
Veronica, she says emotionalism.
Yes, ma'am. And that means shutting your face too.
Yeah.
I tell people I have to learn to shut my face sometimes, because my emotion shows on my face. You don't have to wonder what I'm thinking. I'm showing you what I'm thinking.
And I'm the same way. I am. You can see whatever I'm feeling on my face. You can. Now, Veronica also says, and I'm so glad we've got feedback here. Emotional
Yes, awesome.
lies. Yes, emotional lies. Yeah, we don't want to emotionalize the situation,
Mm-hmm.
which is emotionalism.
Right.
When we emotionalize, we are,
We get caught in our emotions right then and there.
yes,
So we end up reacting versus responding to things.
yes,
And then you
yes,
find yourself like, I'm sorry. Now, come on now. But I've learned from the school of hard knocks, China, be quiet, be slow, slow to talk, but quick to listen. But I've also
yes.
learned, you know what? I'm so happy I didn't say anything because they really didn't mean what I thought or what I assumed.
Yes, yes. That's why listening is so important,
Mm-hmm.
because we may, our whole attitude towards a individual may change if we really hear what it is
Right,
that they're saying. And
right.
then Veronica also said, manage your nonverbals. Yes,
Yes.
absolutely. And there are
Money
so
does talk.
many. Yes, yes. Our emotions and our nonverbals, our facial expressions, how we hold our hands, how we sit, how we stand, all of those things send messages. All of
Mm-hmm.
those things send messages. Now, the other one, now, I hope that our listening audience is getting some stuff out of this. So, let me recap what we've talked about so far. We've talked about avoiding conflict altogether. When we do that, we hold things in, and we don't want to do that, because when holding things in, it can affect us physically, mentally, or emotionally. So, you want to get out what you have to say and not hold it in, because oftentimes we become angry and explode because we've kept it in for so long. Being defensive, overgeneralizing, being right, psychoanalyzing and mind reading, forgetting to listen. And then now the next one is the blame game. And I have to say, I remember after my ex-husband and I split, and I was in Los Angeles, and a church member came to visit me and my son. And at the time, I was rather bitter, and I remember saying to her, if it wasn't for him, if it wasn't for that, if it wasn't for this, my life wouldn't be this way. And she looked at me and she was like, no, Vera, if it wasn't for you and the choices that you've made, then your life wouldn't be this way. We are
Mm-hmm.
so quick to blame other people for things that we've created ourselves. And so, and I am so glad that I recognized that early on, before, while my son was still an infant, because as a result of me really understanding that each of us have to take responsibility for our actions and our behaviors, I was able to instill that in him, and he makes it evident all the time, all the time. And so I think it's important that we understand that we do. And there are so many adults out here that just do not want to accept responsibility for their actions or their behaviors, and they want to blame everybody else
But
because of stuff that's going on with them. And what are you teaching your kids? When you do that, what are you teaching your kids? You're
or how
teaching
are you
your
making your child feel when you don't want to take accountability for your part that you play in it? That actually
absolutely.
tears down a child as well. It really does.
Yes. Yes. Now, um, Veronica says she spent a lot of time and energy on her IQ, but my EQ was on life support.
I'm so with you. I'm so with you.
And
We still,
so
I
many of
feel,
us are. So many of us
I'm
are.
a
We want to be
constant work
smart
in
and
progress.
well, I'm sorry. Say that again.
I said I am constantly a work in progress.
We all are. We all are. We want our IQs up there, but our EQs are down there. So we need to
Mhm.
really look at our emotional um, quantity and quality. Okay. Uh, Is that Chase?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Hold on one
That's
second.
okay. So she has a 10-year-old, and sometimes it's necessary to give them that attention. So I understand. So
Thank you.
plan,
I'm so sorry, you
oh,
all.
no
Yes, I
problem.
do have my 10-year-old.
Not a problem. Now, there has been times when one may have said or thought, if it wasn't for this, if it wasn't for that, just as I have mentioned, things would not be this way. No, again, if it wasn't for us and the choices that we've made and the decisions that we have made, then our lives wouldn't be the way that it is. And a lot of people may say things like, well, life happens, things just happen. Well, they do. So we need to
But
look
you
at
still have control. But you still
exactly.
have control. And I just had this conversation with someone on the phone today, and he was from Jamaica. And he was, I mean, as soon as I just said hello, he just started railing at me. And I said, well, okay, well, I'm just let you have the floor. I noticed that every time I ask a question, you're coming like a machine gun, just coming, blah, 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 blah. So I'm asking you to extend me grace. And so when he finally calmed down, this was like a 40-minute conversation. Okay. And he said, sometimes I get triggered. I said, that's it. Sometimes you get triggered. But God does not, he looks at, it doesn't matter what people do to you, it's how you receive or how you react to what they do to you. And
Absolutely.
you have control over that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Felicia says we should respect everyone's opinion, to really listen to them and try to see things from their point of view. Sometimes we are saying the same things, but in different ways. Absolutely. And that's why in conversation, it's also good to restate what you think you heard, and
Yes.
so that you're clear on your communication. So restating what you think you heard. And
Yeah,
in doing so, you know whether or not you're on the same page or not.
exactly. And sometimes you got to learn to agree to disagree.
Absolutely. And it's okay to disagree. That
That's right.
doesn't mean I don't love you. That doesn't mean that I'm mad at you. It just means that we
I don't
agree
agree.
to
Hmm.
disagree. And it takes two to argue.
Yes.
So the next one is always trying to win the argument, sometimes making a case of how wrong the other person is, discounting their feelings, and staying stuck in your point of view. That's dogmatic.
Hmm.
And
You
that
don't.
can,
You're not being open-minded. You refuse to be open-minded, and that's nothing good will come out of that.
no. And, we need sometimes compromises is what is necessary. We
Yes.
don't always need to win the argument.
Yes.
We don't always need to win the argument.
Sometimes
Some,
you got to be wrong, and you got to be wrong even if you're right. I've learned that. I've learned that in life, and you know what? And for me, it's not about they always say you want to one up on someone. Every time you look, you want to one up. No, I don't have to one up because my answer now is okay, and I keep it moving.
yes, yes.
Hmm.
And then this other one, I really have a pet peeve about this, making character attacks.
Oh, I'm
You
with you
know,
on that. That's one of
you
my pet
know,
peeves.
sometimes taking any negative action from others and blowing it up into a personality flaw. Now, when we do that, we are not addressing the issue. We're not addressing the behavior. We're not addressing what really is the case. Instead, we're belittling and we're talking about your personality flaws and calling names, the name calling, and it's just too much of that going on anymore.
Hmm.
And what a child, now when a child sees an adult always doing that, they think it's okay.
Hmm.
They think it's okay, so they feel like they can do it as well. Well, and we got too much of it going on right now in this country
Mhm.
as a whole. It's too
Mhm.
much of this going on. And I personally feel like once we need to start calling stuff out. We need to even, like your son was able to say to you, Mom, when you yell at
Mhm.
me, it makes me feel. Kids need to feel comfortable enough to say to a parent, when you do this, when you call me names, when you attack me as a person, it makes me feel a certain way. And I know it to get to that point of being able to say that, it takes courage. It takes strength. It takes confidence in one's ability. And even in relationships, when you find that your significant other is doing that towards you, call it out. Let them know. And as Eleanor Roosevelt said, no one can make me feel inferior without my permission. And
Exactly.
so you may be calling me these names and I know it is not so, and I cannot allow you to continue in this vein because it's going to
Mhm.
affect self-esteem and confidence. Children should be able to express those things, but and again, parents need to recognize in so doing this, you are only deflating and minimizing your child and or your relationship.
There are plenty of times when I had to go to my children and say, address a situation that I didn't handle properly, and then said, forgive me when I did so and so and so. I cannot
Yes.
stand people who comes to me and say, well, would you forgive me for whatever I did that I did? Well, what did you do? What are you asking me for forgiveness for? So when you go to people, it's not when I did or if I did, it's when I did so and so and so, because you have to acknowledge that you lacked in that area. Now I'm asking you, I'm acknowledging it when I say when I did.
Yes,
Because when you say
absolutely.
if I did does not acknowledge anything.
No,
That's
it
a
doesn't.
generalization right there. And
Yes,
that's not going to cut it.
no.
Hmm.
So being open and honest with your forgiveness,
Yes.
address and call the thing what it
Take
is.
accountability and
And
responsibility.
absolutely, absolutely. Now another one is stonewalling. Sometimes defensively stonewall or refuse to talk or listen to anyone. It's like standing there like this. I don't want to hear you. And stonewalling doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't resolve the issue. And it can cause it to snowball and get even worse. So if you're unable to address the issue, acknowledge that you're unable to address the issue at that time, but that you will come back to it rather than putting up a wall or refusing to talk or refusing to listen. And if you're in a mode where you don't want to talk about it, then say it. Look, now is not the time. Let's talk about this later. This is not working for me right this second, instead of stonewalling.
And people need to respect when you say that. And I tell people, if I get quiet or if I say, hey, let's revisit this, and you still bark, 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 you get what you get, because I've tried to tell you not to do this. So when I was younger, hey, you get what you get. But people have to be that this is where accountability comes. If they are telling you this is not going to be a good time, don't push them on, because now
Yes,
you're going to use as another argument of derailing and saying, well, you will let me, blah, 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 blah. But I told you I needed my space when you
absolutely.
did not give me my space
Absolutely. And see, you have to acknowledge and respect where people are coming from. They're
or
not
boundaries.
always going to be coming from the same place. And even though
Right.
you may be in the mood to talk about it, let's talk about this right now. No,
No. Yeah.
I can't do it right now. I'm too either emotionally invested or I just can't do it right now. We need to set it aside and let's come back and discuss it when we both are in that place that we can calmly speak about the issue. Now, Felicia, she says, once I dealt with the part I played in the issue in different situations, I finally found a solution. I can't change people. I can
That's
only
right.
change myself
Yes,
and
ma'am.
how I react to things. So when I'm
Mhm.
stressed and overwhelmed, I have to reevaluate what I am doing and find a solution. And that's very true. People often want to change other people. We can't change anyone but ourselves. And sometimes
Exactly.
by us changing ourselves, that may be the very thing that changes the person that you are with or wanting to change because they're going to
Mhm.
begin to see your change for the better and want to get on board.
Right. So what I've learned is I tell people, you know what? At this very moment, I'm not in a place where I will listen right. I won't receive anything you have to say. So let me do this. Let me sleep on this and we'll come back and have a discussion tomorrow.
Well, let me say, as long as you're sleeping on it and you're not angry,
No,
you
I don't go to
know,
bed angry.
no,
That's the
because
that's the person that's the reason of doing it because you want to decompress. So when you come to this, because we're going to come back to it, I promise you that. But I will come back to you rational, and it gives me the opportunity to let the Holy Spirit comes in for me and let Him come and minister to me and say, "Hey, China, you could have handled,
yes,
what could have been done differently, said differently." For this not to happen. And then I'm like, oh, well, you know what? I could have went about it this way, blah, 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 blah. And so when we come back together to the table of reasoning, then we're going to have this conversation.
yes, and absolutely, and again, the Lord will direct you because I remember having a heated, um, well, actually, I wasn't arguing because when I walked in and saw that the person was all bent out of shape, I just kindly left and said, "Talk to you later," and
Yep.
um, and then I went to the Word because I needed direction as to whether or not I needed to go talk to that person or not. And when I opened the Bible, it said, "Be silent, O daughter." Those were the exact words. "Be silent, O daughter." So I said, "Okay, Lord, I hear you." And I didn't say anything. And a few days
Mhm.
later, the person came to me, and then we were able to rationally and calmly talk about things. That's very important.
Very much.
And then you have this all or nothing thinking. This type of thinking polarizes or is dichotomous. And I like that word dichotomy. A dichotomy is how things may look pristine on one side. For example, I see Boston as a dichotomy. You go on this, there's one side where it's all this wealth and all this money and all this stuff, and right across the street is poverty.
Wow.
I mean, now I don't know if it's like that now, but I know when I went to Boston and I saw that, that was a dichotomy. One way on one side and another way on the other side. And it can lock one into believing that the situation can only be viewed in two categories rather than in
Black
shades
and
of
white.
gray. Right. If I'm not a total success, then I'm a failure. No,
Right. Exactly.
it's not all or none. There is some gray. And just because I fail at one thing does not make me a failure in life. Think about it. Abraham Lincoln failed 11 times when he ran for public office. He failed 11 times. Did that make him a failure?
Nope.
No, it did not. It just
Remember,
meant, it just meant he had to do it over and over and over again until he got
But
it
what
right.
he gained was there's always a lesson in a failure. Remember
Yes.
that. It's never a failure, it's a lesson. And that's what
Absolutely.
he learned. Every time he got defeated or rejected, he learned
learned
and he
something.
learned and he learned. So when that time came, when it was his time, it happened.
Yes, yes. And all things in time. And everything that we go through, there is a lesson to be learned, whether
Mhm.
it's good or bad. You know, there is a lesson in everything we do, in my
Yes.
opinion. That's how I feel. Now, catastrophizing. This is when we believe that I can magically predict the future without considering other more probable and outcomes. Like, for example, I'd be so upset I won't be able to function at all. You know, how we just blow things totally out of proportion.
Or go in shutdown mode.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes, yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes. And there was a post today in one of the groups that I'm in, and the post, I didn't write it down, but in essence, this individual was saying, does anyone else feel like that the world is just coming to, in essence, coming to an end or something like that, you know? And it's not the situation, but how we see the situation that can make all the difference in the world. And our circumstances do not define us. However, how we relate, react, and respond is the key to our existence in actuality, and being
Mm-hmm.
positive or negative. And when we catastrophe, this word is hard to say, but when we catastrophize, when we catastrophize, then what we're doing is just really blowing things all out of proportion.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to leave that alone.
Unnecessarily.
Unnecessarily. I can't believe my tongue got twisted like that, man.
That's all right.
Okay. But you know what? Okay, we've only got a few more minutes, and we have several more of these.
Sounds like a part 2 of the show.
That's what I think too. I think so too, because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh yeah, there's quite a few. So listen, Fouchina, I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you for having me.
And I'm going to leave you with our last words.
Oh, wow. Okay. I was expecting that. What I would say is utilizing the power of your voice and the power of your choice. Choose. Everything is a choice. No one make you do anything that you don't allow them to do. People cannot do anything to you that you do not allow them to do. Utilize your voice and utilize your choice. Take the time to stop. Instead of reacting, respond to things. That is what I leave you with.
That is awesome. And we got a couple more comments. Felicia says, great conversations, ladies.
Thank you for tuning in.
Yes, thank you. And then she says, when it's your time, it's your time. Absolutely. And that's like the song, what God has for me, it is for me. When it is for me. When he deems it so. And so let patience have its perfect work. Thank you all for listening. We will be doing a part 2 of this. I do have some guests that are scheduled, but we're going to find the time to do part 2 of this. Well, listen, thank you all for being here. And I look forward to seeing you all next week. Have a great week. Have a great year. God bless. Bye-bye.
The Vera Thomas Show. The Vera Thomas Show. The Vera Thomas Show. The Vera Let's talk about it. 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 Let's talk